Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, December 4th, 2020. Time for another show. There, I've said the things I need to say in order to begin. Brain, go! Doesn't seem to be working just yet, but okay, let's lean instead on Bill for his morning tweet on the wake-up portion of the show today. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. This much I've already told you, but good reminder in case you've forgotten in between then and now. Kagro X, me. That's David Waldman. I host the show. I don't know if I've introduced myself to you lately. Anyway, I have only one question in all this excitement. Good, because that's all I can handle today. Do you know if Trump will be golfing in Virginia this weekend or at Mar-a-Lago? Well, do you, punk? We might as well ask it that way. Why not? Yeah, no word on whether he's taking... Oh, I've seen no word. I haven't gone looking yet. But I guess I ought to, just to figure out what's going on traffic-wise around here. I think it's going to be a cold and rainy day here today, so I don't predict him knocking off early Friday if the thinking is that he'll go and play golf here. He might yet take off for Florida. I haven't checked what his plans are. There's no way of knowing because there's only like a pandemic that's killed nearly 300,000 people and shows no sign of abating. The massive logistical project of manufacturing, packaging, distributing, and administering millions upon millions, hundreds of millions of doses of vaccine from across at least, 3 manufacturers. There's a not-so-great jobs report. Apparently, we're still, although we had some progress in new job creation, I guess if I saw correctly, the numbers leave us at a point below where we were last year before the pandemic started. So, or at least before the pandemic hit our shores. So, not much in the way of recovery. Let's see. The government runs out of funding in a week from now, on December 11th. The defense appropriation or defense authorization bill, I guess, I'm not sure which one it is anymore, but I think when they say, I think they've been talking about NDAA, which would ordinarily be the authorization program, under threat for veto by Trump unless he gets some concession or another, which I'm not entirely certain I understand exactly what's going on, although Justice took a stab at, his pithy one-liner explanation. It actually does help clear things up, letting me know that basically we all have to tweet nice or the military funding gets axed. I've seen Trump, whining about Section 230, not something I'm overly familiar with, but as I understand, as the story appears to be coming together in my head anyway, and it's a great story in my head, is that he wants Section 230. I don't even know what Section 230 is. You all do because you've been following it closely, mostly because, I guess probably because he's been ranting about it, but we might as well look it all up. But apparently, I don't know what, he wants Section 230 of something, the Communications Decency Act, I guess, eliminated so that, he can sue people or platforms that allow people to say nasty things about him, something like that. That sounds very Trumpy and like something he might do. But anyway, whatever it is, it doesn't really even matter what the actual thing is. But if he doesn't get his way in the National Defense Authorization Act for some reason, because I guess that's the only bill that's likely to pass between now and the end of this Congress, if he doesn't get his way on that bill, he's going to veto it, which of course means Donald Trump is marching around in circles, carrying signs and saying, defund the military, but no one's hanging that on him for some reason. Everybody is worried instead about a person who wasn't running for office once said defund the police or something like that, and so therefore national tragedy, and we all have to examine everything and do autopsies and whatnot about everybody and every candidate in every district whether it made a difference in their district or not, whether they won or lost or tied. There are probably a few ties out there that we don't know about. And but defund the president saying defund the military. Well, whatever. Besides which, I guess I suppose the people who are interested in saying that the defund was responsible for a great deal of actual wins and losses, I guess is what they're arguing, at the ballot box. I guess you could say, although he didn't say it until after the fact, Donald Trump endorses defunding the military and he has lost his election. So I guess there is that, though I don't know if he was saying it beforehand. Anyway, all right, well, just as it turns out, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act is what we're talking about here. Section 230, we'll read what the Electronic Freedom Electronic Frontier Foundation, used to be, I think, the Freedom Foundation, but anyway, now they're Frontier. And they're all obsessed about the internet, so they must know what the hell's going on here. It's 47 U.S. Code Section 230 now of the Communications Decency Act. And what does it do? Tucked inside the Communications Decency Act of 1996. Wow. Is one of the most valuable tools for protecting freedom of expression and innovation on the internet. Section 230. So I guess that really tells the tale. It's one of the most valuable tools, according to these guys, for protecting freedom. And Donald Trump says it's got to be eliminated, or else I will eliminate the people who, we like to say in colloquial parlance, protect our freedom. Many of them would probably object that it is not a colloquial parlance at all, but they literally do protect our freedom. Yes, to some extent, that is true. Freedom is a many-splendored thing, but okay. That's we'll save that for another day and move on. Why not? What do we want to talk about today? I don't know. Who cares? I'm not telling you anything. The only way we can get anything done here is to approach this as what do we need to do to give you a good knowledge base for the weekend so that you can resist Trump's various rage tweeting or understand the kernel of truth at the heart of someone else's rage tweeting. There's very little else that we can hope for on this planet until Donald Trump is gone. By which I guess we might as well just say until he's dead and buried, but because he's going to make trouble out of office for a long time anyway. Although I am very curious to see whether he can hold as many people in his thrall out of power as he could in power. I'm curious to see what newspapers do with him and as a result what the rest of us do with him. As a matter of fact, I did see Armando tweeting this morning. A good point, I thought, in response to the tweet of the New York Times' Nick Confessori, who proudly retweets a screen grab, a capture of the front page of the New York Times, the paper where he works. He should be proud of his own paper. I mean, you should always be proud of your paper in the general sense. Hopefully you're doing a good job there. You don't necessarily have much on this day. But anyway, he's very proud of himself, and we'll give him a small victory. I don't want to say you have to take everything away from you this morning, Nick. You got to get up and go to work, right? He's proudly tweeting the thing and saying, look, 0 Trump stories. Today's New York Times front page, 0 Trump stories. To which Armando replies, I think quite correctly, that they are all Trump stories. There are just no stories that normalize Trump. As he puts it, no normalizing Trump stories, which is good. It took you 5 years to get around to getting it done, and that ought to be recognized. But yeah, it's an interesting perspective and tells you kind of what we're in for in the next couple of years, I suppose. But it might be, it very well may mean that despite the fact that Nick is kind of wrong about whether or not they are Trump stories per se, offhand, there's no Trump in the headlines, I guess. And I'm sure that he knows that Trump had a role to play in every single one of those stories. They're national headlines. But I suppose it does bode well. Like if we could spend the next couple of years with Trump out of the headlines because he's not a figure in power, that would be great. Now, I guess the excuse will be he threatens to return to power by running again in 2024, but the New York Times doesn't have to necessarily take that seriously. Certainly not for the first 3 years of the Biden administration. He doesn't have to take it. No one has to take it seriously. And it's not until 2023 that anybody really will care to read a headline about what people challenging for the Republican nomination have to say anyway. And even by that point, I mean, quite honestly, the cognitive decline we've witnessed in Donald Trump makes it really difficult to believe that in 3 years from now, he'll be able to stitch together sentences that, will even work for his rally crowds. It's kind of a sad situation. What passes in, at least in Nick Confessori's mind, off the top of it, I think if he had it to do over again and analyze in brighter, under a brighter light, he would say, all right, I understand that there's Trump involved in all these stories. But just out of curiosity, the headlines, let's see, top left here today, because we'll start that way. That's the way English is read. States grapple with shortfalls as aid expires. Where does the aid come from? The federal government. Who sits at the head of the federal government? The President of the United States, Donald Trump. Let's see, California to reimpose strict lockdown rules as hospitals see surge. Why is there a surge? The man sitting at the top of the power structure in the United States and the federal government has done nothing to combat this virus, done no work coordinating the efforts of the states, done no work in terms of teaching people by example how to combat the virus while we wait for treatments and vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. That's on him. What else have we got? Lawmakers inch toward deal on aid package. Why wasn't he using, as we always used to like to call it, the bully pulpit to berate the Congress into faster, more effective action? Because he didn't give a damn. It's a Donald Trump story. Cyber attacks are discovered on vaccine supply network. Who might be responsible for protecting the vaccine supply network from cyber attacks? Oh, I'd say federal government. There's a guy in it. He's the president of it. Whatever. Let's see. I mean, he might possibly escape the same direct blame for, after 2 merciless hurricanes, rising fear of a new refugee crisis, except for the fact that 1, 2 merciless hurricanes probably fueled by global warming, the existence of which he denies. And not a generous person with the foreign aid, certainly. And, of course, famously ran for president and won on it the first time, allegedly, anti-refugee. So it's it too, Donald Trump story. And then, let's see, lastly, in the bottom right corner of the front page, because, of course, for black woman, is it a woman or women? I have to get in there close. Yeah, women. I would think women generally. For black women, a long fight to change how Georgia voted. And of course, they were successful in changing how Georgia voted. And so that has roused the Kraken in the form of Donald Trump, not the lawsuits, to do everything he can to put himself at odds with the results of the vote in Georgia and the black women who created the situation, and do everything he can to devalue, disenfranchise, and disregard them, and overturn the election results there, and everything he can to make sure it never happens again. They're all Donald Trump stories. And that's just the way he'd like it, too. Donald Trump would certainly tell you they were all Donald Trump stories. It doesn't bother him that they're bad news. Of course, I would like them to report nice things, but all publicity is good publicity to him. So, all right. A good way of starting things off here. What else have we got? Well, let's see. We'll comb through Pocket and through the Twitter feed and try and decode my own prioritization system. Let me first issue this or repeat this strong denial by the still, to me, pretty clearly drunk lady who did the witness appearance for Rudy Giuliani in Michigan. Everybody has seen this clip. Everybody's enjoying this clip. Saturday Night Live will doubtless treat this clip. She insists she wasn't drunk. So just for the record, that's what she says about those things. I find it hard to believe, although it is possible that she's just, permanently damaged and permanently intoxicated, or was perhaps there on prescription drugs. I have no idea. Or maybe she was totally clean, but just is the kind of person who gives the appearance of being intoxicated at all times. The Daily Mail, which is not really the most trustworthy of sources necessarily, but one of the funniest, certainly when they're dealing with something like this, did a whole profile on this woman who's got a name and everything, and we should probably say what it is, even though we don't have to really, we're not crediting her with anything, but, whatever. She's a human. Melissa Carone, I guess, is her name. She's, I guess the main thrust of the headline of the Daily Mail story is also of some interest. It's an exclusive to them, which means no one else has been able to verify this. I don't know. Trump's newest star witness, that's her, to the, quote, voter fraud, who claimed she saw Dominion Systems, the voting machine manufacturer, claimed she saw Dominion Systems being rigged, was at some point in the recent past, anyway, not on the day that she gave her testimony, but in the recent past, on probation for conviction in a computer crime after a plea deal, which also, by the way, dropped an obscenity charge that was pending against her. So I don't think anybody has any news yet on what the hell was that situation all about. I read through the Daily Mail piece, and they don't really tell you. But her story that she was offering up as a witness was based on the fact that she was apparently in the counting center, not as a volunteer observer, as many of the other witnesses were, but rather as a contractor, she says, for Dominion Systems, which is interesting. So I guess she considers herself an insider whistleblower. I was actually working for Dominion, and I saw all the scheming that they did to fix the votes, except most of her testimony is mostly about what other people who were not working for Dominion were doing. And, of course, she didn't do a stellar job in presenting herself as a together enough person to be relied upon as a witness here. But anyway, whatever. There's plenty we could talk about with her. I did have a feeling, though. Somebody else dug something up about her that I guess she's an aspiring actress and model as well. I did have the feeling from her appearance that might have been, not that she was an actress or a model or anything, but that she had sort of dressed up a little bit, very little bit, for the part. That is, the putting her hair up and wearing the glasses to like give herself some, well, as it turned out, it ended up being like a drunk librarian look. But I think it's supposed to be a librarian, bookish look that was supposed to help us take her seriously, like she was a scholarly, serious source. But, well, the rest of the performance gave it all away. She's not a great actress. She's just an aspiring actress nonetheless. Anyway, yeah, so, I mean, the only thing I really took away as meaningful from the fact that she apparently maintains a page on a site called exploretalent.com, which looks a little sketchy, quite honestly. Like maybe you put your profile up there to get modeling and acting gigs, and I don't know. I have a feeling that maybe they're not all, mainstream cinema, maybe. And they might be recruiting for like really sort of funky kind of modeling and acting. Do you get what I'm driving in here? I mean, whatever. Anyway, but yeah, in all the pictures when she's trying to sell herself as an actress and model, no glasses, no updo, whatever. Anybody can, I mean, it's not conclusive. You can put your hair up without having to be, oh, she's acting about something. That's not the point. The point, though, is that ordinarily when she's looking to make an impression on people, she dresses and styles her hair very differently. And, I mean, it was appropriate to the occasion. I mean, you must say that, right? You were supposed to be taken seriously at this thing, so it's a good idea to put the hair up if you think that helps, and the glasses, and maybe she does need glasses ordinarily and takes them off to model because she's got she's vain like Donald Trump or any of the rest of us are when it comes to modeling photos. But when it comes to making a serious point, I mean, the fact that she can't make a serious point is a different problem, and that's the one we really ought to be focusing on. But anyway, I had a feeling that that's kind of what she was up to. I will also say this, the Explore Talent Portfolio, she doesn't need to explain that or anything. And although she did offer an explanation, I want to be a model. I want to be an actress. Who wouldn't want to be paid for standing around and getting your picture taken? I know it's hard work if you're good at it. If you're bad at it, who wouldn't want to be paid for being bad at it, right? Even that. So, but I thought it was interesting. She's, said modeling is something I've always wanted to do. Is a passion of mine, which usually means, a fashion is the passion, and modeling it is a good way to get paid, enjoyable way of getting paid while enjoying that passion. But anyway, I guess I would say questionable fashion sense, to say the least, in terms of you chose the outfits, I assume, because no one was paying you to model that stuff. Or, I hope someone was, quite honestly, because otherwise, you're just living this disastrous life in this horrible, your closet must be a nightmare. Anyway, but yeah, so it's better to think of it as somebody was paying her to model these clothes. It's just, the clothes, not great. The photos, not great. No mystery why she's working as a contractor for a software company, which, absolutely a fantastic line of work to be doing, especially if you're not particularly good at the modeling and you're not getting any work as an actress. I happened to notice that she was listing the positions she was seeking as a model and actress were all non-union work. She would appear in live theater, but for non-equity roles, and she was a non-SAG Screen Actors Guild affiliated actress, so couldn't be put in roles reserved for the union members, etc. I don't know whether she's like philosophically anti-union, although that seems to be the case because she's kind of a bit of a Trumper, but also I've never joined those things, so I can't claim those and get those scale wages. So you don't think about me in those terms. Anyway, so that's the news on that front. She'll become even more famous this weekend, and now you'll be ready to analyze her place in the pantheon of the famous individuals. That'd be the Hall of Fame, I guess. In this country. All right, what else have we got here? Oh, I wanted to mention something yesterday, a follow-up piece that I meant to include alongside our discussion yesterday of the lunatic Florida man attorney who who videotaped himself and put out on Facebook his advisory to the Bay County, Florida Republican organization that everybody should temporarily move to Georgia and re-register there in order to vote in the runoff elections. We remember that his plan was to register to vote from out of his brother's house, and he was telling everybody else, you can do the same, and we'll all just pretend that 200 of us live at my brother's house, et cetera, and have some mail forwarded there and try and fake up the residency requirements so that at the very least they either don't come after me, or that when they do, I have some sort of defense and I can put a question mark, or in the heads of the jury. Well, I shouldn't bother interrupting for that tea. It's tepid anyway. But somebody did point out to me and to everybody the other day that this is actually not unknown, for one thing, but in addition to it not being unknown, it should be a more infamous practice. It is, after all, exactly what Josh Hawley, Senator Josh Hawley, to you and me, unfortunately, does, though he represents the state of Missouri in the United States Senate, poorly, I would add. But Josh Hawley owns no property in Missouri, but registers to vote out of his sister's house in Missouri. Now, I'm sure he did at some point own property in Missouri, and there's probably good reason to believe that he is, quote unquote, from Missouri and grew up there. But it's interesting, a lot of senators have done that in the past, and on a temporary basis. And he claims it's on a temporary basis. But here's a story that clears it up from the Kansas City Star. Josh Hawley, who owns a house in Virginia, uses his sister's home as a Missouri address. I guess here what I would say is, for those who say, oh, well, I'm in between houses in Missouri or wherever I'm supposed to be representing, many members have been caught doing this. I registered for the time being at a relative's house, and I intend to make my residence in Missouri at some point, as soon as I'm no longer between houses or whatever. But it really kind of has to be more legit than this, and it turns out it's not. And sometimes people can plead, believe it or not, you can plead poverty on a senator's salary only because you really do, if you have a family, have to maintain a residence not only in your state that you're representing for appearance's sake, but if your family is going to live with you in particular, in D.C. or nearby, then you got to maintain two houses. And, if you got a big family and you need a big house, it's a difficult thing to do, even on a senator's salary. And, have a nice place, the kind of place that perhaps you were used to before you ran for Senate. Other people have done it. But anyway, I guess the point here, very briefly, believe it or not, is that Josh Hawley, it's not like he's poverty-stricken. He managed to scrape together the means to buy, I think, $1.3 million home in the northern Virginia suburbs. There was none left over to help boost the real estate market in his beloved home state of Missouri. I guess not. He's not the first one to do it, of course. We'll remind you of that when we come back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. Shall we give you the details on what Josh Hawley is up to, besides just being a massive jerk? Josh Hawley, very irritating guy. Let's see. He has frequently railed against coastal elites in speeches, the Kansas City Star tells us. In particular, Brian Lowry of the Kansas City Star, or at least for the Kansas City Star. Who knows what his employment status is? Anyway, let's see. Railing against coastal elites in speeches. Last year, he sponsored legislation that would relocate thousands of federal workers from Washington to economically distressed areas of the heartland. I'm not really 100% sure exactly why that's part of that lead, but I guess the idea is supposed to be, forget all these coastal elites running the government. Let's take them and move them to the heartland, where I guess they'll be heartland elites. I don't know. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know what to make of that one. Mike Musson, by the way, just chiming in with the question. I don't understand. Sure you do. Doesn't Josh Hawley have to be a resident of the House district where he runs as a candidate? And of course, well, okay, he's in the Senate. Usually, yeah. You know what? It's interesting that you bring it up that way too, because I'm offhand, I'm not 100% certain what the Constitution has to say about senators, and I think it's just because of the way they structure the sentence that the residency requirement, I think, is supposed to apply to both of them. You know, it would make sense if it did. We should probably look up the actual citation and parse it at some point, but I have lost the Constitution. I'm looking. You hear it from the sound of the microphone. I'm looking around. This is my looking around sound effect. And I've lost it, so it doesn't exist anymore. That's the end of the Constitution. Sorry about that. I really meant to keep it. But anyway, yeah, generally speaking, certainly everyone would expect that of everyone. And you know what? That gives us an opportunity to discuss a recurring theme on this show. Yes, absolutely, 100% ironclad requirement of the Constitution, but so effing what? Somebody is violating it. What are you going to do about it? Yeah, I'm going to point it out. Okay. And then I'm going to wait 6 years, and I'm going to say, boy, oh boy, will you pay for this at the ballot box? And maybe they do, maybe they don't. People forget. By that time, he's bought a shack somewhere and says that's his house. I don't know. But, you know, there's no mechanism by which you can enforce it fast enough such that he doesn't have time to correct it, or that he can't go into court and plead, you know, some stupid extenuating circumstance that I own, you know, I rent a garage somewhere. It certainly, for instance, can't be the case that it's a property ownership issue. We don't have that test in this country. It's unconstitutional, etc. You know, certainly somebody who rents an apartment for their entire life in whatever state, or, you know, for some decent chunk of their life anyway. You rent an apartment, and you know, you're every bit as much a resident of that state as somebody who owns property there. So that can't be the yardstick. And so everybody just scratches their head and says, all right, when push comes to shove and it's time to, you know, prove something, what, I got to go to court or something, and I got to find a court that's going to say, yeah, what, the election is invalid, you're no longer a senator. The senator, you know, the other thing the Constitution gives the Senate is the power to determine the qualifications of its members ultimately, and nobody's expelling him. So the courts may very well say, this is the prerogative of the elected branches, not ours. It's a political question. I can't settle it, even though settling questions of legal residency is well within their purview. But who knows what they'll do. It's just one of those things, right? The Constitution says it. Everybody's supposed to do it. This guy didn't. Now what? I don't know. So here's his story. Let's see. Oh, yes, he was going to relocate lots of federal workers to his state, which I don't know exactly what that was supposed to prove, but it's in there. But a review of property records, which, whatever, that's one way of looking for residency, shows that the first-term Republican is no longer a Missouri homeowner, and that he is registered to vote at his sister's home in Ozark, Missouri, while he is in between homes in the state. I'm sure that's the way he put it to them. Now, again, I guess I would say, remember that we just said it would be unfair to disqualify renters who live in Missouri from qualifying for office. So you might ask, do you pay any rent? I guess just by the same token, then eventually a good progressive would come around to saying, if by some strange miracle a homeless person were to get the nomination for their party and win election to the Senate, and thereby presumably improve their prospects for housing themselves, we wouldn't disqualify them for that either. But that's not exactly what we're talking about here. Hawley does own a $1.3 million house in the Northern Virginia suburbs. I don't know which one, but we could probably find out. And that's where he spends most of his time with his wife, Erin Hawley, and their 3 children. Hawley's parents, Ronald and Virginia Hawley, Virginia Hawley, not living in Virginia, she lives in Missouri, purchased a lot in Christian County, Missouri, which violates the separation of church and state. I don't know. Well, anyway, Christian County. Well, they purchased a lot. Not like a whole lot of things. I mean, a plot of land in October of 2019, which is nice. Who cares, right? Well, they added him to the deed, according to property records, but a house on the property is still under construction and Hawley isn't residing there. And also, he didn't buy any of the damn thing. They just put him on the deed so that he would have somewhere else to register to vote with, or to say, look, I'm a property owner in Missouri, just don't look at the property. So, you know, the whole extended family is in on the joke of maintaining Hawley as a Missouri resident. Anyway, instead of pretending to live in the house that was under construction, he has claimed his sister Leslie Hawley's address in the same county as his home address, in the same county, that is, Christian County. He claims that as his home address and used it to vote in the 2020 election, which maybe means voter fraud because he doesn't really live there, right? When Hawley took office in January of 2019, he said he told the St. Louis Post-Dispatch he would split time between the Springfield area and the Washington suburbs. Hawley lived in Columbia during his stint as a professor at the University of Missouri Law School and 2 years as Missouri Attorney General. But in March of 2019, the couple sold the Columbia home, according to the Boone County Recorder of Deeds. That same month, Hawley and his wife were added as co-owners to his parents' home in Springfield, according to the Greene County Recorder's Office. That property was sold in June. So, he's shuffling all over the place. He had a house in Columbia, but I sold it. Well, I'm a co-owner of my parents' house. No, I'm not. They sold that house. Well, I'm a co-owner of their lot where they're building a new house. Yeah, right, sure. And I live at my sister's house. And I have a $1.3 million house in Virginia. But I can't manage to, there's no shack I could put my name on and pay property taxes on in Missouri at this point. $1.3 million is just tied up all my liquidity. Sorry. All right. So you get what's going on here, right? A little more than a month after the sale of the Springfield property, Hawley changed his voter registration address to his sister's home in Ozark. He's also using the Ozark address for his registration with the Missouri Bar. Not where he drinks, but the legal bar. Records from the Christian County Collector's Office show Leslie Hawley, a dermatologist, has paid the property tax bill on the four-bedroom Ozark home since 2018. And I guess he's got nothing to do with it. Josh pitching in nothing. No benefit of the bargain at all to Leslie except having a brother who's a senator, and who knows what kind of favors that leads to. For a dermatologist, I don't know whether there's a whole lot in it. But let's find out. Hawley's office did not answer questions about whether the senator is paying his sister rent. That's a no. How many nights he has stayed at the Ozark property. That's a 0. Or his decision to use the address for his voter registration. That's illegal. Nor of all that being my own commentary on it, but I think you would probably reach the same conclusion. Nor did the office offer a timetable for completion of Hawley's new Christian County home, because they don't know, because it doesn't matter, because it's his parents' home, and he's not going to live there either. In a statement, Hawley spokeswoman Kelly Ford criticized the Star for asking about the senator's registration. How dare you? And attacked a Democratic-aligned group that recently raised the issue. You bastards want to know whether he lives among the people and is not a coastal elite. Josh and Aaron sold their home in Springfield earlier this year to build a new one in Ozark, Missouri, and are staying down the street with family in Ozark while it's finished. No, they're not. They live in a $1.3 million home in Virginia. We realize Ozark may not be ritzy, but it suits Josh and Aaron just fine, you elitist bastards. It's just smarmy crap that they're spooning out here. Anyway, the Congressional Integrity Project, the ones that everybody thinks in the Hawley office, these are the bastards who are asking the questions. It's a Democratic-aligned group, allegedly, that investigates Republican senators. I don't know. I think they probably do a lot more than that. Anyway, the group alleged in an October report that Hawley's decision to register at his sister's house could be a potential violation of Missouri's voter registration law, which requires voters to register at their residence. Along with misleading his constituents about where he really lives, Hawley is possibly breaking the law, the Democratic group said. On Twitter Wednesday afternoon, Hawley posted a photo of the house under construction and a picture of Michael Cohen's passport, I guess, and linked questions about his residency to a Tuesday hearing on the tech industry, which took place weeks after the project released its report. Why? I don't know. One day after I exposed more liberal big tech censorship. This is this connection in his fevered mind. The reason they're going after my residency is not because you're supposed to be represented by a local, but because I dared speak out about big tech censorship when they say things like Donald Trump's tweets are full of crap. That's censorship. All right, well, this is it. One day after I exposed more liberal big tech censorship, and in his written statement, he, I guess, includes the hashtag. So he's a super serious guy. One day after I exposed more liberal hashtag big tech censorship, some George Soros Democrat group right, is attacking me for, wait for it, because he's an a-hole, wait for it, building a new home in Ozark, Missouri. How dare you? How dare you? The house is coming along great. We love Ozark. Dem losers, thanks for playing, Hawley said on Twitter. Okay, so using the hashtag, much more understandable. Not an official press release. I don't know. Good. Kansas Republican Representative Steve Watkins faces prosecution in Shawnee County, by the way, after using the address of a Topeka UPS store on his voter registration and allegedly voting in the wrong city council district in 2019. That could just be a mistake, but using a Topeka UPS store, come on. I mean, buy a friggin' house, you losers. You know, these people are probably out there like, if millennials weren't eating so much avocado toast, they'd be able to afford a house. We're not going to forgive them their student loans. It's interesting that on $180,000 salary, not even so much as renting an apartment. They won't even drop a couple thousand on that masquerade, right? Pretty amazing. They're so in tune with everybody's financial worries in the real world. But Hawley's use of a family member's home is unlikely to create the same legal problems, according to Missouri attorneys who specialize in election law. For one thing, it's Missouri and not Kansas. But for another, residency is where you want to be, not where you are. Interesting, said Chuck Hatfield, a Jefferson City attorney, allegedly. Maybe he's not from Jefferson City, I don't know, whose past client include Hawley's 2018 opponent, former Democratic Senator Claire McCaskill. It's kind of circular. What does it mean to be a resident? And this is the right question to be asking about a legal proceeding, right? It's not very well defined, and the courts have been pretty darn lenient. Darn lenient. I can't imagine a scenario where Josh is in violation of the state law, Hatfield said. Hawley's residency is likely to be more of a political issue than a legal one, especially as his national profile continues to grow ahead of 2024, when he could either run for president, because he's 13 years old, and he's allowed to do that, I guess, or a second term in the Senate. Can you imagine? Right? He's done nothing. Nothing. But whatever. Okay. Maintaining two homes, one in-state and another in Washington, among the most expensive metro areas in the world, true, often puts a financial strain on new lawmakers. While affluent compared to average Americans, Hawley is on the low end of the wealth spectrum in the U.S. Senate, because you got Kelly Loeffler, who's like $50 million worth, I don't know what. Actually, she must be worth considerably more than that, because isn't Mitt Romney's like a good $250 million, so maybe it's $500 million or so that Kelly Loeffler is worth. Hawley's on the low end of the wealth spectrum in the U.S. Senate, a chamber full of multimillionaires. When he was elected in 2018, his assets were estimated at between $500,000 and $1.7 million, with between $250,000 and $500,000 in liabilities, according to the Center for Responsive Politics. The financial disclosure Hawley filed with the Senate covering the 2019 tax year does not list any real estate holdings as assets, but it does list 3 mortgages as liabilities, including one tied to the Columbia house that was sold in 2019 and paid off. So maybe he didn't file correctly too, but no real estate holdings. Interesting. And he's co-owner of everything in the state, apparently. Certainly anything the Hawleys own. Other senators from the region have faced questions about where they call home. Kansas Republican Senator Pat Roberts, who spends most of his personal time in Alexandria, Virginia, ran into trouble during his 2014 re-election campaign when it was revealed that he rented out his Dodge City property and was no longer maintaining a home in Kansas. Instead, he was registered at a friend's address. I have full access to the recliner, Roberts told the New York Times, a quip that haunted him throughout a hotly contested primary and the general election. It's a very, familiar scenario. Hawley used a similar line of attack against McCaskill in 2018, then pushed her out and then did the exact same thing, is basically what this story is going to come to, claiming that she had drifted away from Missouri and pointing to her real estate holdings as evidence. And hypocrite that he is, he's doing the same thing. She flies over us in her private plane, from family vacations with Chuck Schumer to Hollywood fundraisers with Barack Obama to her luxury condo in D.C. Claire McCaskill is just another Washington liberal, Hawley said in a statement 2 months before the election. Hawley overcame his own residency controversy in 2018 when McCaskill and others accused him of flouting a state law requiring the Attorney General to reside in Jefferson City. I don't know why you would necessarily require that, but okay. Roberts and McCaskill are creatures of a different era in Washington, where lawmakers spent extended periods of time in the city and formed friendships that facilitated bipartisan deal-making. Hawley, on the other hand, has framed himself as an outspoken critic of Washington elites. That's too self-serving, really, to have included in there, but let's see. There's a complaint speech about how bad Washington is and how good he is, but that's all upside down and backwards now. He returned to the theme in the fall of 2019 when he proposed relocating 10 federal agencies, including the Department of Commerce, Department of Energy, to the heartland. It's such an insular place, Washington, I guess. And people forget that there's a vast country out there, and there's lots of places in the country that aren't like D.C. and haven't seen gobs of money poured in. Not really sure, again, what that has to do with anything except that he wants to pour those gobs of money into Missouri. Fine, that's the job of the Missouri senator. Let's see. I think that's pretty much all we can wring out of this one. I just will remind you that, and this is a good avenue for inquiry if you're interested in digging further into Hawley here. 3 kids. How old? Where do they go to school? I asked that question because Rick Santorum famously ran into the same issue. He lives and lived then in Virginia as well, out near me, not too far anyway, out in Loudoun County, and maintained a posh enough home out there. Now, he moved all the way out to Loudoun County before it was cool because he could snag for himself and his big family, famously large family, right, the Santorums, a nice big place for a reasonable amount of money. I mean, compared to the compared to the $1.3 million that Hawley has spent here for he and his 3 kids. I don't remember offhand how many kids the Santorums had, but I think it was about twice that number, and that they had been looking to expand their family even further. A lot of kids in the Santorum family, and they had a very nice home outside of Leesburg, Virginia, which I think at the time was, bought for something on the order of $750,000, which is nothing to sneeze at. It's no $1.3 million, but the same house actually could have gone for $750 back then and $1.3 now. So about the equivalent. But he had twice as many kids. So I don't know. We'll just put that out there. But Santorum was doing the same thing. Didn't own a home in Pennsylvania. Registered to vote out of a family member's home in Penn Hills, Pennsylvania. I think the Santorums, as an extended family, all lived on this one street in Penn Hills and bought houses next to one another, or maybe bought land and built houses. I don't know exactly what it was, but anyway, there was a 3-bedroom house, little thing, that it too was being, like the other guy, was being rented out at the time, but I think rented out to cousins, other Santorums possibly, but a family with no kids or perhaps one child, not the 7 or 8 member Rick Santorum family that said that they were living in this 3-bedroom place, but instead was living in Virginia. But the more important part about it, and the reason I brought up where they go to school, is you might recall that his kids were homeschooled. I don't know what Hawley's kids do, but I wouldn't doubt that that's a possibility, especially now during the pandemic. But Santorum was in this situation of, having to pay for materials to homeschool his kids, and there was a lot of kids, right? So I'm sure nothing to sneeze at either, since we're not doing any sneezing here today. But he used the voter registration and the claim of residency in Penn Hills to take advantage of a Pennsylvania law that permitted residents of a school. Everyone's a resident of some school district, I guess, and you could turn to your school district based on your residency. And if you were going to homeschool, homeschooling proponents in Pennsylvania, I guess, got this provision passed. If you're paying taxes and paying, therefore, to maintain a school system that other people's kids go to, you should be entitled to some benefit for this, even if your kids are homeschooled. You're paying taxes. And so basically what it is that the school district would provide materials for your kids. I don't know whether they paid for computers as well, to do their homeschooling free of charge, on the taxpayer dime, just the way kids who attend public school would be doing so free of charge and on a taxpayer dime. Except he wasn't really a resident, an actual resident of Penn Hills, and so therefore wouldn't ordinarily have been eligible for this benefit. I don't know whether he actually paid property taxes himself out of his pocket in Penn Hills or not on that 3-bedroom house, or whether he prevailed on the residents to do so as part of their rental agreement. I don't know. Of course, if he was paying the property taxes, then maybe he is kind of sort of entitled to it. But the rule was that you actually had to be a genuine resident living there day to day in Penn Hills in order to take advantage of it. And he just told him he was, and nobody asked any questions, and he's a senator, so he must know what he's doing or be an important guy, so we should let him do it. And I guess after that was revealed, I think they ended up getting booted. There was really no choice but for the school district to boot them. And then, what do you know? He found a way to come up with a couple $100 to buy the homeschooling materials that he was grifting off of the rest of the taxpayers of Penn Hills, Pennsylvania, and the rest is history. So it's not new. It's just dirty. And, probably there are some Democrats doing the same thing somewhere. But they're probably not running around saying I should be in office because the elites in Washington, D.C. are doing this terrible thing that I actually am about to do as soon as you elect me. But who knows? If they do, kick them out. All right, let's see. A couple of comments here. Oh, Ricky chiming in from up in Canada. What do you have to say here? There's a big scandal, she says, here. That would be not only in Canada, but on Prince Edward Island in Canada, her province. Big scandal here a few years ago when a very well-known media person was appointed to the Senate. He listed his home as a cottage here on PEI. Charming, I'm sure. Even though he's lived in Ottawa for 30 years. And again, you could hardly blame them. Like, if you lived, Ottawa's probably very nice. But if you lived in Ottawa for 30 years, you'd want to live in a cottage on Prince Edward Island. But he had to do that. He had to have a primary residence on PEI in order to be a senator from PEI. He had no proof that he was a resident there, which he needed. And let's see, he asked the province to fast track his application for a health card that I guess will help you establish residency. They said no. No health for you. No home here on PEI either. I found the whole thing incredibly funny, but it was a big deal at the time. Incredibly funny, except here's something even more incredibly funny. You guys did something about it and said no to the guy, and we all say, ooh, Mr. Big Senator, you're 12 years old and your whole record is calling Dems losers and I hate you and I hope you go to hell. But here's a whole bunch of benefits, and by the way, a $1.3 million house. Okay, so that's the state of the world with respect to that particular kind of garbage. Let's see. Other news here, follow-ups on other stories. House Democrats have chosen Rosa Deloro to head the Appropriations panel, throwing a curve into the previously discussed curveball and the Moneyball situation. Debbie Wasserman Schultz had it all over Rosa Deloro in terms of the amount of money raised and spent on fellow Democrats. But there was, of course, the twist of this election has a primary, essentially, that is conducted among the members of the Steering and Policy Committee, which we talked about yesterday. And they make a recommendation, and that carries a lot of weight in the caucus elections. The caucus votes on all these things ultimately, but members of the caucus probably have a pretty good idea who they want to vote for Speaker, or Majority Leader, or Majority Whip, and some of the top positions out there, but and maybe even have some strong opinions about who should be the chair of these committees. But if they don't serve on that committee, they're probably going to take the recommendation of the steering committee pretty seriously. But also, by way of bucking that trend, I note that, let's see, did we not put this one aside somewhere? I thought, yes, Sean Patrick Maloney, chosen as DCCC chair. And I don't think here that the Steering and Policy Committee makes a recommendation in that race. I think that's just brought directly to the caucus. And here he was running against Tony Cardenas, right? And I think we went over their financials to try and determine, trying to make a prediction. And the Moneyball prediction goes to Cardenas in this, and Maloney actually won. So that's one strike, at least, directly against the quick and dirty prediction model. I do think that there are a number of other factors at play. And, actually, we should hope that there are other factors at play besides the money. I would be seriously disappointed if there were members of the House Democratic Caucus who actually said, I'm going to determine my vote based on that, and actually did the same analysis, the same craven analysis I spent my time on. But it's a pretty good predictor because it's a proxy of the relationships that have been forged. I will point this out. Cardenas, there's not a huge amount of money separating the two of them, nor was there, there was a larger amount of money separating Deloro and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, but Deloro has done an awful lot of work in that line. But two things. One, Cardenas, some of the giving that he was doing was very interesting. He was giving money to Sean Patrick Maloney in all this time. Also of note, though, Sean Patrick Maloney's own leadership PAC was also giving a lot of money to Sean Patrick Maloney, which is, legal and all that, but interesting. It's not usually what you use your leadership PAC for, but he was doing it. So, I guess you could factor that in. Both candidates were giving money to Sean Patrick Maloney from out of their leadership PACs. Oh, my computer has gone to sleep and it doesn't want to wake up, and I can't, it's preventing me from playing my break music. So that ain't good. All right. What's going on here? There we are. We finally broke it out, and for some reason it was stuck on pausing that thing, so this will be very awkward as we are, in fact, right up against the break. Within seconds, the clock will give me the out I need, not the music. We'll see you in a minute. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I realized as I'm listening to the music and getting ready to come back from the break, oh yeah, I just said less than a minute ago, this is very bad news, neurologically speaking, that the music was screwed up. Okay, let's see. I think we know what we need to know about Josh Hawley. I guess I can credit Brian Young for bringing that particular observation to my attention, that Hawley had done the same thing. He tweeted about the Florida man story, that this guy used his brother's address to register in Georgia. That's exactly what Josh Hawley did, using his sister's address to register in Missouri. Although, I guess you could say slight difference between the two of them. He was originally from Missouri and wanted to stay, I guess, as part of Missouri, whereas the Florida man was not a Georgia man and decided to switch states entirely. But anyway, it's an interesting practice, and you should keep your eye on it, and don't be surprised when it pops up later. So, okay, let's see. Other things I wanted to bring to your attention. Yes, right. We were talking about the leadership races. These are two very interesting articles describing the differences in the situation, and I guess giving some clues as to why the outcome of the race might have departed from the prediction model based just on money. And I think you can probably figure out what those are. That guy gave me a lot of money, and that guy gave me a lot of money, and I have to decide between the two of them. That's one way. That guy gave me a lot of money, that guy gave me a lot of money. That guy I just personally get along with better, and that could be a reason. Or that person just seems better prepared for the job. In the case of Sean Patrick Maloney, also, worth pointing out, along the way to what my real point is that there is some sensitivity inside the Democratic caucus that their leadership be diverse, and each of the candidates had a claim on a diversity theme here. Cardenas as a person of color, Sean Patrick Maloney as he's very pale in color, but one of the first openly gay members of the House from anywhere, from among other things, but among his state delegation, and prominently outspoken in that sense and a worthy inclusion for that reason, but not that reason alone. The other reason being he actually brings something to the table as a candidate for the DCCC that isn't often the case, and it's having done an awful lot of prep work and homework on the subject beyond simply demonstrating some fundraising prowess. Bridget Bowman, reporting for Roll Call, puts it up this way. Let's see. Updating us and letting us know that House Dems have chosen New York Representative Sean Patrick Maloney to lead their campaign arm in 2022. And Maloney has his work cut out for him. He defeated Tony Cardenas in the race to chair the DCCC, leveraging his knowledge of the committee's inner workings and his own experience running in a competitive district. That's everybody. Well, not everybody runs in a competitive district. And actually, quite honestly, top leadership spots very often go to people who don't run in frequently competitive districts. And that's interesting. And it's a weird sort of self-selection. Here's how it works. I mean, you'd think you'd want somebody who runs in tight races to perhaps help run at least the DCCC because they know what it's like to be in a competitive race. Although this particular last cycle wasn't that close after all. In fact, he's been all over the news in the last week or so, last couple of days or so, as the counting has been finished across New York State. It turns out that his race was not that close at all, but maybe in previous races it's been closer. So I can't invalidate the claim. But interesting. Here's your side note about why is it that they don't tend to have people who run in a lot of tight races at the top of the leadership. It's not just that you could get knocked off, because the rest of the caucus doesn't care about that. If you get knocked off, great. I get to run for your position. It's not great, but you get the idea. Maybe you lose in a primary. I don't know. Anyway, but the way the self-selection process is kind of an ancillary to what we've been describing. You get to top leadership by distributing excess campaign funds that you can rake into your leadership PAC and use for those purposes. But you don't have much in the way of excess campaign funds if you're constantly engaged in tight races and tough battles for re-election. It's very difficult to build up that additional funding. Although I guess the fact that I mentioned that Sean Patrick Maloney has made, significant distributions from his leadership PAC to his own campaign account testifies to how close his elections have been at times. But he's also had the ability to raise excess money. And so that comes up in the context of the lack of leaders among the top leadership who frequently, engage in tight races themselves. It also, for a long time, explained the absence of a very diverse leadership and lots of members of color, for instance, in the top leadership, because, of course, a lot of the members of color represent districts which are largely populated by people of color, and very frequently that unfortunately overlaps with districts that aren't swimming in disposable income, let's say, where it's a difficult thing to raise directly from among your constituents, not only enough to campaign with on your own, but enough to pass out excess contributions to others. And that has changed somewhat in recent years, and it's somewhat mitigated in some cases by the fact that a lot of times the members who have served there, particularly if they've served for a long time and have the strong reputation among the constituents, such that it's very difficult to mount a serious challenge against them, and not a whole lot of cash is needed to run one of those races. That can be a double-edged sword. But when you get to the point where, okay, now I can raise some certain amount of money from among this constituency, and of course as a member of Congress and a rising, up-and-coming member of Congress, you can reach outwards from outside of your district and pull in contributions from elsewhere, even if they are small dollar personal contributions, and you're able to stick to that as opposed to seeking out corporate PAC contributions. But, that happens too. But as we said, it can be a double-edged sword. Sometimes you can establish yourself and use excess funding to campaign for leadership, but also it's sometimes the case that you establish yourself as a leader and your re-election campaigns are relatively low-dollar affairs, and you just leave it that way and say, I'm not going to, break my back to raise cash elsewhere because I'm comfortable in my incumbency and I'm doing a good job here and I'm helping the folks in my district and they seem to appreciate it and I don't need to raise a great deal of money. And then they don't. But then they realize, I have also missed out on a chance to rise in the leadership ranks. And it took a while for people to realize what that was doing and what the result was, and to reverse it. Anyway, Sean Patrick Maloney, to give you more detail on what we mean by his leveraging his knowledge of the committee's inner workings, etc. Democrats, let's see, it's a tough spot to be in right now. Dems in the 117th Congress, which we're entering now, have one of the smallest majorities in more than a century, and face a difficult re-election or election cycle in 2022, since, historically, the president's party typically loses House seats in the midterm elections. I don't know if that's going to be the case this time or not, but everybody's preparing for that possibility. Also, House districts will be redrawn across the country to reflect population changes in the 2020 census. And, of course, Republicans doing their best to game that census, but also Democratic efforts to capture control of state legislatures that would control that process came up empty in November. But Maloney is determined to reverse that trend, and he told Roll Call in an interview last month, I don't give a damn about the past. I'm not a historian. My job is not to whine about it. My job is to win. Tough talk, the sort of thing you might be interested in voting for in a situation like this. Maloney succeeds outgoing DCCC chairwoman, Illinois Representative Sherry Bustos, who almost lost her own race after Democrats faced disappointments in races across the country. Instead of adding to their House majority, it has now shrunk to single digits, and Democrats did not defeat a single House GOP incumbent. And that has made a lot of people uncomfortable with her tenure at DCCC. That, among many other things, including the blacklist situation, which we mentioned the other day, and which Maloney addresses in his pitch to the caucus. The election results have fractured the caucus, disarray, with progressive and moderate members directing blame at one another for the results of the DCCC's work, I guess. Last month, Maloney declined to speculate on the factors behind the 2020 election results, pledging to conduct a post-election autopsy to determine what went wrong. And he's done it before. So this is the interesting part. After the 2016 elections, another disappointing year for Democrats, Maloney conducted a 5-month analysis of the committee's operations, culminating in a series of recommendations and changes at the committee, which has not been publicly released. But the fact is that at least he claims, and others agree, that he did do this thing. That sets him up rather nicely in this election campaign for the DCCC chair. He launched his run for the chair even though his own race was still not called, thanks to delayed ballot counting in New York. He defeated his Republican opponent by 11 percentage points in the end, the largest margin of victory since he won his first term in 2012, when he flipped the Hudson Valley District to become the first openly gay person elected to Congress from New York. Maloney was endorsed by the Congressional LGBTQ+, there's a plus in there, Equality Caucus, as well as some of the leaders of the moderate New Democrat coalition, including its chair, Washington Representative Derek Kilmer, its incoming chairwoman for next year, Washington Representative, they just pass it around Washington, I guess, Susan Del Bene, and its chair emeritus, Connecticut Representative Jim Himes. He boasted a wide range of supporters in his race for DCCC chair, from moderate Dems in competitive races to more liberal lawmakers. During the race to be DCCC chairman, Maloney pledged, here we are, to establish a vice chair for women's recruitment and voter engagement. He also appeared open to ending a committee policy not to work with consultants who also work with candidates challenging sitting Democrats in primaries. Maloney said last month that that policy needs to be carefully re-examined, and he would want to be sensitive to members' concerns. But I think blanket rules in this space are ill-advised, and I think we should be careful not to needlessly separate ourselves from the most sophisticated and diverse talent working in politics today, Maloney said. So that probably garnered him some support from among other members as well. So it's not just the money thing, but if you were ever wondering, well, what sorts of things do you say in campaigning for DCCC chairman in order to sway votes your way? That's one of the answers. There's an article in The Hill about the contest as between Rosa Deloro and eventually just Deloro and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, noting for the record, I think the best thing to pull out of that one is that Marcy Kaptur withdrew from the race. I guess saw the writing on the wall, maybe from our Moneyball analysis, but probably not. But you get a pretty good sense of where the votes were going, and then once it became obvious that the Steering and Policy Committee was going to endorse someone other than her, I think she wanted out of the race. So it came down to a two-way race, and Deloro upends the prediction model given the wrinkle of the Steering and Policy Committee vote as well. So important to know about the mechanics of how those races are settled. Let's see. Other things of interest. I guess we should bring this up too. I happened to see a little discussion about it on Twitter. We'll give you the news on it just so you... I'm not entirely clear what's going on here, but I think we got a pretty good clue of what's happening here. In Iowa's 2nd district, where we mentioned the other day that the vote was apparently, well, it was certified anyway, as having been decided by just 6 votes. That 3-time loser Mariannette, remember her name, Mariannette Miller Meeks, has made the 4th time a charm, and it appears to have won, and the state has certified her victory in flipping that district back to Republicans, and I guess it was an open seat. Rita Hart, who was the Democratic nominee there, apparently plans to appeal the 2nd district results directly to the House of Representatives. And apparently this is upsetting a lot of people as well. People who, I guess, are trying to stand on a certain moral high ground, and I would want to too, say in putting themselves in opposition to Donald Trump's crazy fantasies about him having won the election now, and I want the House of Representatives to change the outcome for me. Not exactly the same situation here. And it has happened before, as opposed to with the presidency. I don't think anybody has ever lost the presidency outright and had a general consensus form around the fact that the other person won, and have pushed to throw out electoral votes such that it would then technically create a situation where the House would have to decide it. That hasn't happened before. But contested congressional races, particularly very closely decided races, have in fact been appealed to the House before, and the House has in fact changed the outcome before. The House has the constitutional prerogative to determine the qualifications of its members and decide to seat one versus another claimant to these seats. First, the current news. Bridget Bowman on this one too for roll call, plus Herb Jackson under that headline I gave you. Iowa Democrat Rita Hart to appeal 2nd District House results to House. It may fall on Congress, the House specifically, to determine who has won the closest House race in 36 years. The race in Iowa's 2nd District was decided by just 6 votes after a recount, with Republican State Senator Mariannette Miller Meeks appearing to defeat former Democratic State Senator Rita Hart in the open seat race. State elections officials certified the results on Monday, and on Wednesday, Hart announced she plans to appeal to the House to consider ballots not included in the recount. It's not simply a straight-up power play of, I lost fair and square, but I want the House to use its majority power to vote to seat the Democrat rather than the Republican who's been certified by the state of Iowa, but rather that she would like a House panel to review her claim, laid out here in the article, that certain methods of counting in the recount are, in her view, highly questionable and might in fact make the difference in determining the outcome. The overturning of state-certified results by the House is rare, and last happened after the 1984 elections. That would, I think, be the Indiana 8th District, like actually famously known as the Bloody 8th, although I don't know whether that's necessarily the 84 race that they're talking about, but it was about that time period too. The Democratic majority at the time, I think, did exactly that and said the controversy leads us to believe that the Democrat should have been certified the winner but wasn't, and we're going to seat him instead. And as you might expect, usually members seated that way don't last very long. It's true that the constituency sometimes tends to resent it, but not always, and also sometimes they just don't care. They need that vote. All right. Hart could have challenged the results in court, but election challenges in Iowa must be completed by December 8th, and Hart's campaign did not believe that left enough time to resolve the issue. Miller Meeks's campaign lawyer, Alan Ostergren, said in a statement that Hart, quote, has chosen to avoid Iowa's judicial system because she knows that a fair, objective analysis of this election would show that what we already know, Miller Meeks won. Well, of course, that's what Miller Meeks' attorney would say. Rita Hart has chosen a political process controlled by Nancy Pelosi, and that definitely deserves dramatic music. Controlled by Nancy Pelosi over a legal process controlled by Iowa judges, Ostergren said. All Iowans should be outraged at this decision. Maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. Hart is filing a petition with the House Administration Committee under a 1969 law that lays out procedures for contesting state election results. She plans to ask that ballots that were legally cast but not included in the initial canvass be considered in the recount, which is prohibited under Iowa law. It might be for good reason, might be for lousy reason, I don't know. But you get the point here. What happened is that the ballots that were legally cast but were not included in the initial count should be considered in the recount. So, for instance, you might have set a ballot aside where there was an overvote for president. I don't know how that really happened, but let's say you filled out a ballot and you said, I will vote for Joe Biden and Donald Trump because I love them both so much. And for Congress, I have a clear preference for Rita Hart. But the ballot may have been set aside for an overvote. And according to Iowa law, the methodology makes a lot of difference here. Iowa says if your ballot didn't get counted in the initial count, it won't be counted in the recount. Even though in some states that, the opposite is true. And you might say, well, in the recount, we'll take a look at things that didn't go into, the machine rejected because of an overvote, but where the voter's intent is clearly discernible on other races, or at least some of the races on the ballot, we will count it for those races. But in Iowa, they say we count it for nothing. If it doesn't make the initial canvass, it can't make any recount. There's no looking at hanging chads or anything like that to try to determine what the hell was going on with this ballot or why it was rejected even, as far as I know. Anyway, with a margin this small, it is critical that we take the next step to ensure Iowans' ballots that were legally cast are counted. Hart campaign manager Zach Munier, maybe Meunier, said in a statement. He said Hart would file the petition in the weeks to come. And so, you can still stand on the ground of count all the ballots, count all the legally cast ballots. If you can't count it for one race because there was an overvote or a stray mark on a ballot somewhere, fine, count it for the ones you can clearly discern the voter's intent. That's not, the wrong position to be in. The Constitution makes the House the ultimate judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members. Under the 1969 law, a certified election is presumed valid, and Hart has the burden of proof of showing that it was not. According to a report by the CRS, Congressional Research Service, Hart must state with particularity her grounds for contesting the election, and Miller Meeks will be able to respond. Both sides can take sworn depositions and subpoena witnesses and documents. Not that the House has any subpoena power, but okay. The House Administration Committee which would still have a majority of Democrats in the next Congress, considers the objections and makes a report to the full House, which has to approve any recommendation to seat Hart or Miller Meeks or neither. That is possible as well. Most contested elections that have come before the House in the last century have been dismissed, according to CRS. From 1933 to 2009, the House considered 107 contested election cases. That's not a rarity exactly. In one instance, it declared a vacancy, and in 3 cases, it seated the candidate who contested the results. So basically, 100 times since 1933, these elections have been contested, and out of those 107 times, 4 times have they done anything other than seat the person who was certified. That is pretty rare. The most recent instance of the House reversing an initial outcome of an election was more than 3 decades ago, and it doesn't feel that way. In 1985, in a contest for what was known as Indiana's Bloody Eighth. That's right. After the 1984 elections, Hoosier state officials certified the 8th district results showing Republican Rick McIntyre had defeated Democratic incumbent Frank McCloskey by just 34 votes. The two I love the two Mick names there, McIntyre and McCloskey. Makes it easy to remember. McCloskey contested the election, and the House, and again, the margin there, 34 votes. McCloskey, the incumbent Democrat, contested the election. The House, which was controlled by Dems at the time, initially decided not to seat either candidate. The House Administration Committee assembled a task force to investigate and conducted its own recount. Its own recount. Yes, you can make them ship you the ballots. Which resulted in a 4-vote lead for McCloskey, who was then sworn into office. And I don't know if they get into the full background of this thing or not. Well, we'll read you the piece, and if they don't, note to self, although now I'll never remember. But this has to do with Newt Gingrich, in case I forget. Okay, McCloskey contested the election, right? They give him a 4-vote lead. They swear him into office. As in 1985, the House in 2021 will be controlled by Democrats who face potentially problematic optics in reversing a certified election, while simultaneously railing against Republicans for not accepting Donald Trump's loss, though the president is challenging a much bigger margin in many more states won by Joe Biden than is happening here. That just opens up a huge can of worms, said Charles Stewart III. Always listen to someone named III. A political science professor at MIT who has studied congressional politics and election administration. Stewart said, that's why he's a political science professor. We know he's studied that. All right. Anyway, Stewart said, considering the challenge puts Congress in a position of essentially changing the rules after the election. Iowa does have that rule. It's just a very dumb rule. This article keeps jumping around as pop-up ads keep moving. Illinois Representative Rodney Davis, the top Republican on the administration committee, said Hart was making a play for the House to act because it was clear she could not win in state court. Probably true, but again, because the rule is kind of stupid. But, that is the rule. They should change that. Now, national Democrats are trying to sidestep Iowans by filing a federal objection to maximize Speaker Pelosi's currently razor-thin majority. Davis said, I remain confident that Dr. Miller Meeks, wow, and the people of Iowa's 2nd District will prevail. Miller Meeks' victory would further shrink the majority Democrats captured in 2018. The GOP targeted the 2nd District after 7-term Democratic Representative Dave Loebsack, who prevailed in tough election cycles, including in 2010 and 2014, opted to retire. Trump carried the seat by 4 points in 2016. Democrats quickly coalesced around Hart, who ran unsuccessfully for lieutenant governor in 2018. Miller Meeks, who challenged and lost to Loebsack 3 times before running for the open seat this cycle, had to fend off former Illinois Representative Bobby Schilling in a GOP primary. I don't think I even realized that was the case. An ophthalmologist, she is also a former director of the Iowa Department of Public Health and a retired Army reservist. The qualifications aren't bad. Don't know whether she's a wild and woolly Republican. If there are any other kinds left out there, maybe she's one of them. I don't know. Anyway, very interesting. Newt Gingrich is implicated here, by the way. I guess I would say, just quickly, Newt Gingrich basically credits that McCloskey-McIntyre course campaign and that reversal with giving him the impetus he needed to start his particular brand of anti-democratic politics in the House. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday. But our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, did you get my point that I was trying to squeeze in before the break? Newt Gingrich credited the reversal of the McCloskey-McIntyre race with lighting a fire under the Republican conference in the House, then led by now relatively, what we would consider a moderate Republican, Bob Michel. And Gingrich was, all about trying to organize Republican members for a brutal fight towards taking back the majority. And this helped launch his 10-year slog to the 1994 elections, the Republican, quote-unquote, Republican Revolution elections that, installed him as Speaker of the House and really cemented this new style of Republican approach to elections and to governance that, really hadn't taken root until then. Of course, 1984, still in the middle of the so-called Reagan Revolution, but Gingrich was certainly relatively unknown, not quite a backbencher at that point. I think he was first elected, like 78 or something. So he's got a couple of years of experience under his belt, but yeah, he's just that. He was the annoying firebrand new guy that was throwing bombs from the back of the house and wasn't really gaining any traction among the House Republican Conference at that time for his confrontational style. And it wasn't getting anywhere. But then they were all pissed off by this election result and all started to think maybe this jackass has something here, or at the very least I should join up in order to vent my frustration. And the rest is stupid history, I guess they would say. I say it anyway. So I just thought I would throw that one out for you. It's important to realize. You might not see this one come out this way, not only because it's typically against the odds, but also because of, like I said, the optics of it. Handling Trump's temper tantrum while parsing things such that, with enough nuance, you can see the difference between this case and the other. And it is there, and in all fairness, it should probably be addressed. Well, I guess maybe the House Administration Committee, if they feel up to it, if they feel like wasting time on something like this, might very well say, our recanvassing of the ballots by our rules, by our, count every vote standard, says Rita Hart wins, but will respect Iowa law, but make the recommendation that perhaps they reconsider the law, that in further recounts, their legal code should make room for a recanvassing or an initial canvassing of initially rejected ballots to see whether there are some valid votes out there on these ballots that ought to be counted for some races, if not for all. And but that's not within our power to change the Iowa code that way. And we're reluctant to make the reversal, despite the fact that, if these votes had been counted in another state, it really would have come out that way. And it's sad that the majority of voters in Iowa's 2nd District really did opt to elect the Democrat here, but the rules foreclosed the challenge in Iowa. I mean, it's not ridiculous claim to make. I mean, as we did point out at the beginning, and I guess you would if you build your case this way, you say, Marionette Miller Meeks has run for this office 4 times. And she lost outright very clearly the first 3 times. This 4th time, she claims to have won by 6 votes. And as we were pointing out here, if you had counted these votes anywhere else in the country, you very well may have come to the conclusion that Hart won and that, Miller Meeks lost a 4th time, just like she lost the time before that and the time before that and the time before that. It's really not a shocker. But because of, rules that the Republican-controlled legislature in Iowa, who knows whether they were Republican-controlled at the time they passed that rule, but whatever. And they have different rules for counting. And lo and behold, it turns out, weirdly enough, that the Republican benefits tremendously. And the one who lost and then lost and then lost and then won by 6 votes should be So, at a minimum, they could make a big stink about that and not seat Hart. But I don't know. It would be very interesting to see what they do with this sort of thing. And I guess the answer is probably to be found in who is on the House Administration Committee for the Democrats and what kind of stomach for this sort of fight do we think that they have. All right. I didn't have plans to cover this issue, but I will make note that Rebecca Romans has sent us something that she says, this doesn't look good, and it doesn't. Just so this ought to be part of your weekend conversation, even if I don't read you the whole article. The CEO of China's Sinovac, I guess. I don't know, like Sino, like Chinese, really, Sino-American relations, people would say. Very rarely used prefix these days. But anyway, the CEO of China's Sinovac, for vaccine, I guess, which aims to sell coronavirus vaccine globally, because I guess they've got one, paid bribes for other vaccine approvals, documents show. Yeah, I don't want one of those vaccines. It'd be very interesting to find out how much clarity and transparency there is in terms of your ability as a consumer of the vaccine to find out which vaccine you're being administered in your state or locality when the time comes. I don't know. Better take a quick look at this, though. As China nears a coronavirus vaccine, bribery cloud hangs over drug maker Sinovac. I wonder how they say that. Chinese coronavirus vaccine maker Sinovac Biotech, very clever, is good at getting its products to market. It was the first to begin clinical trials of a SARS vaccine in 2003 and first to bring a swine flu vaccine to consumers in 2009. Its CEO was also bribing China's drug regulator for vaccine approvals during that time, court records show. Sinovac now seeking to supply its coronavirus vaccine to developing nations from Brazil to Turkey to Indonesia. Not us. Might be okay with that. While graft and weak transparency have long plagued China's pharmaceutical industry, seldom has the reliability of a single drug vendor from the country mattered this much to the rest of the world. Yeah, that's kind of tough. Sinovac's vaccine, Coronavac, they're knocking themselves out with the names there, may end up adopted in a number of developing markets. Officials in Brazil and Indonesia, the most populous nations in Latin America and Southeast Asia, say Coronavac could be approved in the coming weeks. In Brazil, Sao Paulo, Governor Doria. We'll go with just with the last name here, but I don't know how they pronounce Joa with the tilde O. Joio. I'm terrible with Portuguese. No experience with it whatsoever. But the Governor Doria, has called it the safest vaccine the country has tested. Which I don't know what that means, but it sounds good. Maybe the only one they tested, but I don't know. Anyway, they haven't released any efficacy data, making it unclear whether its vaccine can protect recipients as successfully as the others from, say, Moderna and Pfizer, which were more than 90% effective in preliminary analyses. It doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't work. It doesn't necessarily mean it isn't safe. It's just, and it doesn't mean that they've been bribing anybody in Brazil or Indonesia. But you don't want to see that, quite honestly. Okay. That sounds bad. Here's another thing that sounds bad. By the way, while we're on the sounds bad section, over in the sidebar, this is from the Washington Post I just read from, other related issues, etc. Number 3 on the list here. Man named Adolf Hitler Unona is my best guess at the pronunciation of the last name. The important last name. Not Adolf Hitler, period, but Adolf Hitler Unona. It's Uunona. Wins election in Namibia. Anybody who has any idea how you would pronounce Uunona in Namibia can let me know. I'm going to say Unona. He's won election in Namibia. For what? I don't know. But he says he isn't seeking world domination. So I guess that's good too. His vice president and Speaker of the House, Pinky Unona and the Brain Unona. However, no comment from them on their plans. I don't know. What did he run for? It doesn't really say. He's become a councillor in the Ompunja constituency, from which it would be awfully difficult to launch a campaign for world domination anyway, I think. But it's good to know that that's not on his agenda. Man. Questions about how he got the name, I suppose. Talk to the parents, perhaps, if they're around. Unona has no connection to his unusual namesake. That shouldn't surprise you. But he does have a sense of humor about the situation. And you would have to. You would think. Unless, of course, he changed his name to Adolf Hitler Unona. In which case, I question the sense of humor. He's not striving for world domination. If it happens, it happens. And does not have any plans to conquer the Oshana region. He has told the German newspaper Bild, which is probably pretty interested in following that. On the official candidates list, the name Hitler was reduced to an initial, with the document reading Adolf H. Unona. Although the results page listed Unona's name in full. So, yes, interesting. Not quite as remarkable as the Barack H. Obama was, but it certainly would have gotten wider notice had he been Barack Hitler Obama, I think. Although that didn't stop Republicans from calling him that anyway. After Unona's landslide victory, the term Adolf Hitler became a top Twitter trend on Thursday as people around the world discussed his name. Of course, 2020 would not be complete if Adolf Hitler didn't win an election with 85% of the vote, one Twitter user wrote, and others ask, is that his real name? That is a good question. Unona said his father had named him after the Nazi dictator, yes, but probably didn't understand what Adolf Hitler stood for. Why do it then? I don't know. His wife, he said, calls him Adolf. You can go with Dolph. I mean, Lundgren did, right? Ahead of the November regional vote, Electoral Commission Chairwoman Notemba, why did I start reading about politics in Namibia? Notemba Chipueja, maybe, urged people to exercise their democratic right and cast their ballots in large numbers. Unona's political opponent, Mumbala Abner of the Independent Patriots for Change Party, how could you vote against them, received 213 votes. The southwestern African country is a former German colony. That helps explain things. And a number of streets and places still have German names. And, of course, helps explain the German interest. Not just the fact that his name is Adolf Hitler Unona. Bill doesn't necessarily go around the world seeking out Adolf Hitlers who run for office. But, okay. Well, that's very interesting. I think we really have to call a stop to this before I run into any more Namibian names that I mangle. don't mean to imply that there's something, awful about Namibian names, or that I'm such a xenophobe about African politics that I'm making the name pronunciation more difficult. It's just, it's tough. Ordinarily, I would ask them, if they were here, I would say, tell me how to pronounce your name, and just leave it at that. Okay, well, that's it for your Adolf Hitler news for the weekend. I didn't realize we were going there, but how can you not when it pops up on your screen? All right, definitely had other things in mind for closing out the last segment of the show. One such story that I can't believe I haven't gotten to yet. The Associated Press's coverage of Trump aide banned from Justice, that would be the Justice Department, after trying to get case info. Apparently, by all reports, another crazy, bonkers, corruption-type story here. Michael Balsamo and Zeke Miller reported this one yesterday. The official serving as President Donald Trump's eyes and ears at the Justice Department, did you know he had one? Has been banned from the building after trying to pressure staffers to give up sensitive information about election fraud, which didn't exist, and other matters that she could relay to the White House to help fuel his idiotic tantrums, I guess. 3 people familiar with the matter tell the Associated Press. Heidi Stirrup. That's her name, and I mean, it's weird, but okay. Heidi Stirrup. Hi-yo, Heidi Stirrup, I guess they called her. At summer camp. An ally of top Trump advisor Stephen Miller, Nazi, anyway, was quietly installed at the Justice Department. Quiet. I'd be quiet about it too. Quietly installed at the Justice Department as a White House liaison a few months ago. And she sucked at it so bad they kicked her out of the building in just a few short months. She was told within the last 2 weeks, 2 weeks, some very short period of time, to vacate the building after top justice officials learned of her efforts to collect insider information about ongoing cases and the department's work on election fraud, the People said. Stirrup is accused of approaching staffers in the department demanding they give her information about investigations, including election fraud matters, the People said. They spoke on condition of anonymity because they thought her name was so funny. No, but because they were not authorized to publicly discuss the matter and therefore shouldn't have been discussing it privately either, probably with Heidi Stirrup. The effort came as Trump continues to level baseless claims that he won the election. And by the way, I think he now claims to have won it in all states, apparently, according to video I saw yesterday. Not sure what his claim is based on there, besides moronic idiocy, but whatever. Anyway, the effort came as Trump continued to level baseless claims that he won the election and alleges without evidence that massive voting fraud was responsible for his defeat to President-elect Joe Biden. Stirrup had also extended job offers to political allies for positions at some of the highest levels of the Justice Department, where she didn't really have any authority, without consulting any senior department officials or the White House counsel's office, and also attempted to interfere in the hiring process for career staffers, a violation of the government's human resources policies, one of the People said. Although that one, I would say this, why not? The Bush administration did it all day long and paid no price for it whatsoever, and those people are still embedded there, making problems and facilitating Trump's chaos. So, whatever. That's another issue. The Justice Department declined to comment. Attempts to reach Stirrup for comment were not immediately successful. On Thursday, Trump appointed Stirrup to be a member of, this last Thursday, I guess, or couldn't have been yesterday, right? Was this story written? It was written yesterday, so maybe it did happen yesterday. Wow. On Thursday, Trump appointed Stirrup to be a member of the Board of Visitors to the U.S. Air Force Academy, because that's obvious, according to a White House press release. This is just people who are about to lose their jobs getting embedded with a federal paycheck somewhere else that no one is going to look and find them out, and will find it very legally very difficult to force them out anyway. So we hate socialism, but give me another government paycheck is the position here. Earlier this week, Attorney General William Barr told the AP that the U.S. attorneys and the FBI had looked into allegations of election irregularities and found no evidence of widespread voting fraud that would change the outcome of the election. We'll see what Trump does about that. To date, we have not seen fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election, he said on Tuesday. It's still weasel words, but okay. Trump he shot the bed at that point, shot back at Barr on Thursday, saying the Justice Department hasn't looked very hard and called it a disappointment. But he stopped short of implying Barr's future as Attorney General could be cut short. It can be. He'll be out of office in a few days. But okay, not any sooner than that so far, unless Trump goes golfing and fires him by tweet. Entirely possible. I anticipate it. Then he said, this was part of the tape, I think, same piece of tape that I saw yesterday in which he appeared to be claiming victory in every single state, though I'd have to go back and review exactly what he was saying in that one. But this was the one where he said, do you still have a confidence in Attorney General Barr? Are you going to fire him? Ask me that in a number of weeks from now. Well, in a number of weeks from now, depending on the number, in a number of weeks from now, you'll be dead. But, that could be thousands of weeks. We don't know. In a number of weeks, like a couple, you'll be out of office and it won't matter. It's just dumb. And I don't know whether he's saying I'm going to fire him in 2 weeks or nothing. It's a non-committal answer. They should all be looking at this. They should be looking at all this fraud, Trump said. He was critical of Barr's statement that much of what has been presented so far by the Trump campaign and its allies amounts to allegations that belong in lawsuits, not federal crimes. This is not civil. This is criminal stuff. This is very bad criminal stuff, Trump said. Stirrup, who was previously a central figure in the Trump administration's push for hardline immigration policies, that's how she got into Miller's orbit, or maybe absorbed it from Miller's orbit, I guess, technically still remains in her position after being placed at the Justice Department by White House Office of Presidential Personnel. The Trump administration, so she just doesn't have to go to work there. She can't go to work there. They won't let her in. The Trump administration has been working to have liaisons report directly to the White House instead of agencies where they work. Across the administration, there have been concerns that the liaisons were undercutting the work not just of career professionals, but also of Trump's own political appointees. Shortly after the election, the Presidential Personnel Office had also instructed the liaisons to fire any political appointees who were looking for jobs while Trump refused to accept the election results. This is interesting because she just got herself another job, which is amazing. These people are unbelievable. Trump's term ends, when, January 20th at noon. Several thousand political appointees across the government will then see their jobs end by that date. The White House Personnel Office has been headed by former Trump personnel assistant John McEntee, who has renewed Trump's push to rid the administration of those deemed disloyal to the president. In September, Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson inadvertently made public his anger with McEntee when cameras captured writing on the back of a page he was consulting during a speech. Didn't hear about that one, I don't think. In a reference to the White House Presidential Personnel Office, Carson's notes said, "I am not happy with the way PPO is handling my agency." It's a sentiment that has been shared across the government. Stirrup, a close ally of Miller, previously served as the acting director of the Office of Refugee Resettlement and was also a deputy White House liaison at the Department of Health and Human Services. I wonder how that one ended. She's been liaison at 2 places, and both have ended rather, I guess, abruptly. And now she's going to be on the board of visitors for the U.S. Air Force Academy because it was her job to look out for people who were trying to get new jobs because Trump had lost. And by the way, she just got herself a new job because Trump lost. It's quite a situation, to say the very least. Okay, let's see. Other items of importance are out there. Let's see. I'm going to share another thing here, which I think will probably close out the show. That was an important one. Scanning for the other ones. Yes. Why not this one? Again, yesterday I said that we could probably spend more time on the police guide that calls BLM a terrorist group. I really feel like we should spend time on that one. The other thing I wanted to share with you, though, was a Slate piece Maybe we'll just save that one. And I won't even tip you off on that one so that I can save it for use later. And let's go back to the BLM thing, because this was really outrageous, and I feel like I gave it short shrift. Police guide that calls BLM a terrorist group draws outrage. Ryan Foley reporting this one for the AP. I better just start reading. This also came out of Iowa. A prominent law enforcement training group, we started this yesterday, is promoting a lengthy research document riddled with falsehoods and conspiracies that urges local police to treat Black Lives Matter activists as terrorists, plotting a violent revolution. The document, distributed by the International Law Enforcement Educators and Trainers Association, contains misinformation and inflammatory rhetoric that could incite officers against protesters and people of color, critics said. It alleges Black Lives Matter and Antifa, an umbrella term for leftist militants, are, quote, revolutionary movements whose aims are to overthrow the U.S. government, and claims they are planning extreme violence. Philip Atiba Goff, Goff, Philip Goff, a Yale University professor who is an expert on racial bias in policing, called the document dangerous, and it is, noting that the association is an important source of training materials for many small and mid-sized departments across the country. It's stunning. It's distressing in many ways. It's untethered to reality. True, said Goff, who is also, by the way, CEO of the Center for Policing Equity. I worry that it leads to people dying unnecessarily. And you know exactly what he means by that. So remember the name, Philip Atiba Goff. I think probably an important figure as we try to figure out what the hell to do about policing in this country. But this is extraordinarily serious. And he says it's untethered to reality. I just remind you that we spent all that time the other day reading about the militia types that are organizing around the idea that we ought to suspend the Constitution and impose martial law, all based on the same sort of claim that Black Lives Matter protesters and Antifa are both terrorists seeking to overthrow the United States government through violent extremism, which is completely bonkers. And it's one thing to see as the manifesto of a completely bonkers organization. It's another to see in training materials for small and mid-sized police departments across the country, and very reminiscent of the time spent in the early 2000s post 9/11 in the Bush-Cheney administration, training the same police departments to think that Islam wasn't a real religion, that it was some sort of pagan religion, worshiping a moon god, and it was dedicated to anti-American violence, and that anybody who was Islamic should be rounded up on suspicion of terrorism. And they were training cops this way. The association in October sent a link to the 176-page paper, Understanding Antifa and Urban Guerrilla Warfare, in an email news update to its thousands of members. The document, labeled Restricted to Law Enforcement Only, is one of the few publicly available materials on its website, which seems awfully dumb because they put that stamp on it and then they didn't restrict it. Anyway, I think they were just trying to frighten people off of it. The Associated Press learned of the document from one of the policing organization's members. The group's executive director, Harvey Hedden, these are the names you need to remember for targeting, defended the document, which he called one member's opinion, except it's not. It's obviously a publication of the group and has their imprimatur, and open for critique and debate, which is nice. Get rid of it. He said the association supports the exchange of ideas and strategies to improve criminal justice training, but does not endorse specific approaches. They just publish them, right? Sure. Hedden argued that fact-checking the paper or restricting its distribution would amount to censorship. So don't do it. And that its publication would allow for peer review by other trainers. What a load of crap. There will always be differences of opinion, that's true, on training issues, but so long as the disagreements remain professional and not personal, we do not censor these ideas, he said. I am willing to allow the trainer to evaluate the information themselves. So if you download the training materials, you are free to dissent from their content. But honestly, you can't be distributing this thing. That's a nonsense excuse. Now, he added, just like law enforcement, I am afraid BLM has earned some of these criticisms and others might be over a generalization, you see, like calling them terrorists bent on massive violence and destruction. Pretty amazing that thing exists. Pretty amazing that they defend it. Of course, whatever. I don't know. Like the proper, everybody normal is attacking the thing, and they ought to be. I wanted to make you aware of it and give you at least a little bit more of a read on this thing. Color of change out there on the forefront in addressing the thing. So if you're looking for a source of more and better information on it, and maybe somebody to throw a couple of bucks to in order to fight this fight, I would say you could do a lot worse, but not a whole lot better, quite honestly, than Color of Change. Been pretty effective in this forum before. So pretty amazing. Once again, the International Law Enforcement Education and Training Association, ILEETA, in case you're looking for it. Stay tuned now for Justice Putnam with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy to get you still further ready for the weekend to come.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
All right, well, top of his story list, of course, Trump still thinks he can pardon himself because he hasn't gotten to Section 3 of Article 2 in the Constitution that stipulates the president shall take care to obey and uphold the laws of the United States. So that's an interesting perspective, too. We'll hear more about that from Justice next.